hold yourself accountable. And if you can't hold yourself accountable, join a group that will. Yeah. Accountability pod, mastermind group, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Hello, welcome back to Pillars of Wealth Creation. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. With me, I'm excited to have Andrew Schutsky. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I am doing excellent. And Andrew and I, we've known each other for what, maybe like, I don't know, 6 months or so?
Maybe a little longer, six,
a
seven.
Little longer. Yeah.
Exactly.
So excited to have you on the show. And I wanted to bring you on, well, for a couple of reasons, just because you're an awesome human being. So that's always fun to have great people on the show. But you started this real estate journey fairly recently, and you've done an amazing job up to this point. And so I wanted to bring you on to talk about this journey and how other people can actually rinse and repeat. Like, what have you done? There's not like this magic trick, but you've just taken it and actually done what a lot of people don't do. So that's what I wanted to just talk about with you. So a little bit about Andrew. He's the founder of Redline Equity, LLC. So real estate syndication firm that specializes in acquisition, improvement, and management of large apartment buildings. And he currently works full-time in the technology space as a CIO for a medical device business. He's based out of Pennsylvania. And he also has over 14 years running real estate rental experience, beginning with house hacking and going from there. So, but dove in big to the multifamily space. He's currently a GP and an LP and has ownership interest in over 1,100 units. And he's also the host of an amazing podcast called Crushing Cashflow, which interviews investors in all stages of their journey to tell their stories about success and failures. So with that said, Andrew, let's dive in, man.
Looking forward to it.
I'm excited. So, you've had, it's not like you're completely brand new, fresh into real estate, but you're newer in the sense of where you're at today in this kind of journey. So let's talk. Let's just take it back from the beginning. First real estate deal, and then where you kind of went from there. So what was your first real estate deal?
Are you talking single family or the multifamily?
Period. Real estate, period.
Yeah. So as you kind of read off in the intro and bio, my first exposure to real estate rentals was back in my first house hack, just, launched out of college, maybe a year or two out. I was traveling in a consulting gig, 50 weeks out of the year. So I bought a single family with my, soon to be wife, kind of, moving in on the side. We weren't married yet, but, and I was like, okay, well, I'm never really here. So I've always been interested in renting. Let me dip my toe in. Let me do the house. I don't think anybody called it a house hacking by the way, back then.
No.
So I rented out 2/3 of my house and I was barely there. The guy that was there was actually traveling. So I never even saw it. It was great. I'm like, wow, I'm paying next to nothing. My taxes were nothing, whatever. And I'm like, wow, I need to do more of this. So over the years, and it was a side gig. It wasn't, I wasn't looking at this as a profession or anything like that. Just more of a hobby and interest. I was dabbling in cars and all kinds of stupid things to waste your money on anyway. But got me interested, did a series of single family rentals slowly over the years, got into short-term rentals, which I still do now to this day, about 6 years ago down the coast of Jersey Shore, which I really enjoyed. And I thought that was going to be my thing for a long time.
Got it.
And as I look, we bought one, we were looking at building, 2, 3, 4, 5 up and down the coast. Just like now, prices started to escalate down there 3-4 years ago to the point where you needed substantial capital to put the down payment on and close. And that led me, we made it a number of offers and things like that down there. And that led me to, okay, let me look at, smaller multifamily stuff on my own. Like I was looking at 8 and 12 units down and actually in Florida. I was like, okay, Jersey's getting really expensive. I can only rent realistically 12 weeks a year. This is only going so far. I can't scale that quickly, right? So what options do I have? I like traveling to Florida. My wife and I like going down there anyway. So again, I was looking at 8 and 12 units. Again, pretty substantial cash outlay, and we could probably buy maybe one building every year, every 2 years. That led me to research, as you know well, Bigger Pockets turned me on to, okay, I was reading all these stories about, how do I go faster? How do I scale this? How can I leverage other people's network experience, that kind of thing? And I discovered syndication. I remember reading, one or two different stories of syndicators who had started pretty much just like I was, single family, dabbling, and was able to, in the matter of 12, 24 months, even doing it part-time like I'm doing, scale very, very quickly. So I went I wouldn't say ballistic, but I went pretty hard in the education and networking space. And for me, I'm a big believer in both those things, and it's helped me in my W-2 job. It's helped me in my personal life, but I really love to learn. I love to meet people. I think it's about treating people with respect and just being genuine and making connections. And that's kind of what led me into my first deal, which I think we're kind of getting to that in a long-winded way. In January of 2021, I think, you and I were talking way back. I was just putting out feelers, going to conferences, reading books, going to any local meetup events, anything that came across my desk. And I think I overcommitted myself because it was stressful. But in hindsight, I met an individual out of a conference, out of, the one or out of 10 calls I was making a week, just connecting with people for, a virtual coffee, if you want to call it that, 5-10 minutes at a time, and connect with an individual. And I was like, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I just want to get my feet wet. I'll sweep the floors, whatever I want to do. Where can I add value? I've got 20 years in corporate, pretty good at packaging things. I can do the asset management thing if need be. I can bring capital to a deal. I've got a lot of investors who are looking, corporate guys wanting to place capital. What do you got? And I eventually struck, we connected with one guy, and he's like, hey man, I can really use some help. I've got a lot of projects on the table. Help me package this thing, help me get the financing together. And then, of course we could use help with the raise. And I was like, I don't know what I could raise, whatever. But I knew at that point, I was like, all right, I gotta get my foot in the door. And then from there, it took a series of months to close, and lots of lessons learned along the way. But that was it, man. From there, it's putting the world on notice.
I love it. I love it. So why, you were going to go small multifamily, right?
Mm-hmm.
What made you not go small multifamily? Was it just the reading and the intrigue of the larger deal, or what was there other reasons?
Two main things stand out. And I think the obvious one is, you only have, my wife and I are blessed. We do really well on our W-2s, but you only have so much capital to deploy. We've got 2 young kids, $2,500 daycare payment, saving for college. You're not left with hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. We're not that fortunate. So there's the capital component, and you can only scale so quickly, so soon. And then the time, right? To hire a full-time property manager on an 8 to 12 unit, you're dipping into a good chunk of your cash flow. And there's no way I'd be managing that myself. So I think those two things are the main reason. I'm like, there's lots of other people doing this. What can I learn from others that have been successful?
Yeah. And the issue with the small deals too, is they're so small that it's hard to raise capital for them. Yeah. A lot of times it just doesn't make sense to raise capital unless you've maybe got 1 or 2 people that just have some money and want to place it with you. But again, that eventually runs out as well. So, okay. You went fast, right, through that. It wasn't that simple. You just didn't randomly one day wake up and talk to somebody and got a deal, right? So step 1 sounds like you were hungry, right? So step 1 was what?
So I'll back up a second too, because there was more to it than just, hey, I met somebody, we connected, we did a deal. Prior to that, and this as well, I was locked in. I picked a market, and I picked actually the Florida market, and made some connections with brokers, took a trip down there, got to know some property managers in the area, got to know some attorneys in there, build out the team, if you will. So I was locked in on Gulf Coast, West Coast of Florida. I'm like, it's a great market. Trouble is, everybody else, knows it's a great market. Cap rates continue to compress. I started, continue to underwrite properties, and I still do today. And without having, 2, 3, 4, 5 years experience, or even, 5 deals under your belt, really, really hard to be competitive and make an offer on your own. So that's when I'm like, okay, maybe I should shift, I was spending probably 80% of my time on brokers, underwriting, and finding a deal. And I'm doing this part-time, right? So I don't have, 50 hours a week to devote to that. I can't do that trip down there every week. They're like, hey, come take a tour. I'm like, I can't just drop everything and do that. So I'm like, all right, where I'm at in my life right now, maybe I should focus at 80% of energy on the networking, continuing the education, but really on the networking and then bringing value to somebody else's deal. Yeah, you're taking a smaller cut of the pie. You've got the W-2 job. You're going to go slower than you would doing this full time. But meanwhile, you can sustain your family life and all that. So that's what I'm like, okay, maybe my value add right now is the capital component, bringing my investors, helping package the deal, but I'm spending a lot less time sorting out my own deal relationship. So that's when I shifted my energy, and I'd say this is like the January, February timeframe, into the networking component. And I'd say for anybody in a similar situation, you're talking about rinsing and repeat. If you're good at that type of thing and you like to network and leverage other people's experience, relationships, maybe you consider, if you're spending 90% of your time like I was underwriting and trying to get that needle in a haystack, maybe your time is better spent investing that in networking and going hardcore in that area.
I was just talking to a gentleman before this, and he was talking about, getting in these deals, and he's kind of sidetracked, and he's got too many deals coming. He says, I got too many deals coming in. I got all this deal flow coming in. He's a real estate attorney. And so he gets all these deals, a lot of great opportunities, but he doesn't know if he can raise the money for them. He doesn't know if he has time to operate them, and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, look, just slow down. Why don't you do one thing? Why don't you get these deals? And then you find people, because everybody's looking for deals. So you have the deals, go partner with people. And that's what you did. You didn't necessarily find the deals,
right?
But you figured out, okay, what can I add to the table? What can I bring that can be useful for these deals that we have? And how can I have a smaller piece of the pie?
Yep.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, and everybody's situation is going to be different and what you enjoy doing. For me, and for the foreseeable future, my role could be the same. But it took me a while to figure that out. Like, what am I really good at? Where should I focus my energy on that one or maybe two things? Not in the beginning, I'm looking at my whiteboard. I had, networking, deals, starting the podcast, which I'm still doing, obviously, but I was spreading myself in 6 areas, and I'm getting value mainly from the relationship side of things. And I'm like, okay, well, that's where my limited energy and time should be better spent in that area.
Yeah.
It's kind of my main takeaway.
Well, and as you progress, right, as you do more deals and you are able to replace that income, that W-2 income, or even if you're like, hey, I might stay in this, maybe this is what you do for a long time, or for, until you retire, who knows? But as you go and progress, you can start to add more little pieces to that pie, right? And now, instead of taking let's call it a 5% of the GP, now you can take a 10% and then a 15%,
Exactly,
and a 20%, and you can grow that amount of ownership that you have and your roles and responsibilities. And it doesn't just become overwhelming because it's that slower, gradual growth. I think so many people in this business, and it's natural, right? It's natural to go, I want to do it all. It's natural to think, what do I have to do? I read this book. This book tells me that I have to, find the deal. Then I have to do the due diligence, raise the money. It gives me these steps. So I'm going to follow these steps. Those steps are not wrong in and of themselves, but it doesn't mean you need to do every single one of those steps. And that's something you figure out very quickly.
That's a great point. That's exactly my thought process is you can be easily overwhelmed, especially if you're working a full-time job and everything, trying to tackle everything, learn everything at once. And that's been my experience as well. It's like, okay, you're leaning in on sections of due diligence. You're leaning in on engaging with the attorney, or, helping with the lease, whatever it may be. It can be incremental, right? It can be, like you said, exactly what my thought process is. You don't need to have 75% of a GP on your second deal, especially if you've got other, coals in the fire, but it can be incremental, right? Absolutely. You can be as small or as fast as you want, depending on your tolerance for time or your attention.
Yep. Most of the deals I see that we get that are failed deals, if you want to call them that, the deals that, the owners didn't do very well on, it's because, it's owned by Frank, and Frank does everything or
Mhm.
tries to do everything, but he does nothing really well, right?
Mhm.
Because he tries to do it all. He doesn't have the teams in place. Those are the majority of the deals that I find that we buy from the kind of the distressed. And I don't want to call them completely distressed, because sometimes they're even okay, but
Mhm.
the owner didn't maximize the value because they didn't have teams surrounding them and support surrounding them.
Yeah. And that's the case with the first deal we found. We started digging in, and clearly they didn't have the time to properly asset manage. Things weren't categorized correctly. There just wasn't oversight. It wasn't that it was like they had just completely neglected it, but those small details over time, the bookkeeping and the keeping up with the expenses just went unnoticed because they had, I don't know, I want to say 20 or 30 properties in their portfolio. And it's the same dude, quote unquote, asset managing the whole thing. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to do it all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's education.
Mhm.
You started out with education. How
Yes.
long did you, let's call it, educate yourself before you started taking the first steps of action? And I don't want to make that sound like getting your first deal.
Yeah.
When I'm talking action, I'm talking reaching out to brokers,
Mhm.
you know, networking with other people. So reading books, listening to podcasts is step one. How long were you in that journey before you stepped out?
And I'm probably, I'll admit, I'm probably the exception. I think I really started researching, I'd say in the October timeframe, reading some smaller articles, things like that. I spent, I'd say, the better part of 2 months, and I oversaturated myself. That was my way of building confidence of like, hey, I want to sound knowledgeable, talking to brokers, networking people. So I kind of just hammered the complete repetition over the period of a couple of months. I read every multifamily book really I could find on Amazon, honestly. So that you don't need to do that is my point. That was my way of establishing confidence to go out and go fast. And then I think right around the start of the new year, you and I engaged, hired a mentor, a coach, and I was like, I'm going all in. Now is the time to just say, hey, everything I learned in these books, let me start doing it. And it was small steps. It was like, okay, meet 3 people this week, connect with 2 new brokers. And it was a methodical, very small chunks, but very consistent over, January, really December, January, February. So a couple of months of education. Again, don't need to do all that. That was just my way of establishing confidence. And if that works for you, phenomenal. If you feel good for one book, okay, maybe a little repetition can help, right?
Not
But
going to happen.
not
You
going to
better,
happen.
you
But
better read more than one book, or you better read that
yeah,
book more than once.
but I found I got to a point where, after 6, 7, 8 books that are
Yeah.
similar content, some were with
Yes.
more detail than others. I get it. But I'm like, okay, I heard this before. I've seen enough. I've read enough. I'm serious about this. I'm excited about it.
Yep.
Let's start calling brokers. Let's start going to conferences. Let's start, underwriting deals. And that was at that point, back in December, it was like a lull of like, there's no inventory out there, no listings. But I was looking at stuff
Yeah.
2 years old on Crexy and LoopNet, and I was like underwriting stuff that was like in Alabama, nowhere near my market. But I just wanted the reps. I was like, I just want to start
Yes.
going through executing the CAs and just seeing how this looks and asking questions. And then I actually took some Udemy courses in underwriting just to kind of get more practice with that. Hooked up with a mastermind group. We would bounce some deals off each other. And I think all that combined really went a long way.
Yeah. Some of the stuff you just talked about, I don't want to glaze over that. The underwriting deal in Alabama or Cleveland,
Yeah,
Ohio, or whatever. And your focus is let's call it Florida at the time. Your
correct.
focus is you're trying to buy something in Tampa or whatever. You're underwriting a deal in Alabama. You have no interest in that deal, but
Yeah,
you're trying to get those reps in.
exactly.
I think that's super important, and a lot of people don't do that. And that's really where you should start, because you just need to practice. You talk
Yeah.
to those brokers, get to know those properties a little bit, get to understand why they worked and didn't work, and talk with the broker.
Yeah.
that's practice. Get those reps in, like you said. That's really
And
important.
I'll say, like, that's not the only way, as you know, I'm an example. That's not the only way to get into a deal, right? But you should still be getting
You
comfortable with
need
the
to know what you're doing.
financials.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're doing. And for me, I mean, again, maybe I'm the exception, but I like to do something 100, 200 times, maybe before I talk to anybody in a meaningful way, because I want to have that confidence level. Not just that's the word for me. So for you, you don't want to develop an over sense of confidence too early. That was my way of just jamming it into my head, getting the reps,
Yeah.
just like going to the gym. You don't develop muscle or endurance from doing something once, twice, three times. It's 5:30 p.m. every day. Do this 7 days a week, whatever it takes.
100%. And yeah, maybe you don't need to know everything about underwriting. Maybe that's not your strength. Maybe you don't need to know everything about asset management. That's not your strength. Raising money. That's whatever your strength is and is not. It doesn't matter. You need to know enough to at least have that knowledge. And especially, I think on the underwriting part, especially, you need to know enough, because if you're going to bring in other people's money, you better know if that's a deal or not.
I was just going to say, I mean, if your own money is one thing. When you're trying, especially when you're trying to establish a brand, you need to do the pre-vetting, right? Because if one of them comes in, it's like, hey, you get some really aggressive assumptions. And a lot of people have sophisticated investors that have seen more than one or two or five deals. They're going to call you out on it if you don't do your homework, and it doesn't leave you in a good position. So you need to be able to, like you said, be knowledgeable enough to look for the tricks that you might see that are commonly manipulated, exit cap rates, the gap between expense growth and income growth, like the little things that you see out there that can vary and can really swing a projected return.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. I mean, and it's easy for a sponsor to make those little adjustments to make a deal look good. I mean, there's plenty of sponsors out there that do a lot of deals that I wouldn't put $1 into.
Yeah.
And then there's others that I would very much trust. And so you want to find those people that you really would trust. Let's talk about these. You closed on 2 deals fairly recently.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to tell me every single last little detail on them, but let's talk about a couple lessons that you learned. Maybe pick like your top 3 to 5 lessons that you learned from those deals.
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of themes, and probably more on the first deal than the second one. So the first one, communication is key, right? Early on, I came in, hey, I'm just kind of riding on the experience of much more experienced individuals, and they're doing, a bunch of different projects at a time. And grateful, I'm grateful for being. I probably wouldn't be there if they didn't have a bunch of the deals going, because they wouldn't need the help. But at the same time, you've got a lot of decisions to make. You're leaning on their experience. And in the beginning, it was kind of hazy who's doing what, right? Like I knew what I was doing, but I'm like, okay, who's got the ball in X, Y, and Z? You're seeing dozens of emails fly in over the course of the weeks from lenders and attorneys. And it wasn't clear who had what, who had the ball on what actions early on. This, I'm back in the day, project manager, many years doing that. I'm kind of disciplined with like, okay, we've got actions, we've got owners, we've got deadlines, who's tracking what. And fast forward a couple of months, things just take forever, right? You have lender delays, you've got attorneys taking a while. Had we established a clear areas of responsibility on day one and had a 20-minute call to hash that out, okay, here's who's on point for the broker side, here's who's on point for the lender, here's who's engaging with the attorney, we could have knocked that stuff out in a couple of weeks. And I think part of it was too, they had somebody new on the lending side, maybe his first, second underwrite. So he didn't know everything to ask right away.
Yeah.
So he was kind of peppering in new things are moving along. And I'm like, oh my God, when is this going to end? And come to realize that like that list should have been apparent from first, second
from
week.
Day one.
You could have knocked that stuff out.
Yeah.
But we all were just chipping away at it. And it wasn't like we had clear grasp of who had what. And a lot of that, I take responsibility for that now. Knowing what I know is like, don't sit in the back seat.
Yep.
Step up and drive. Even if you're the new guy and you may not even know all the questions to ask. You're like, okay, how are we dividing and conquering? And what's the timeline look like? That's just my execution, innate ability coming out. So that'd be one of my things out there. So
Well, but if you're the new guy and you do end up taking charge, of course, not overstepping your limits, but you
Right.
do take charge and you do get this deal to get across the table, you're going to be the first call the next time.
Mhm.
You know, people are going to see that whether you do business with them or not, people are going to see that and they're going to want to do business with you. And so I think that that's valuable, not to be the person, not just because you're new doesn't mean you have to sit back. Where
Yeah.
are your strengths and how can you focus on doing that? And you clearly have some strengths with being able to communicate properly, with knowing what the roles of people are, knowing how to run projects. And so taking that and actually executing on it is going to add us so much value, and they're going to be so appreciative of having you that, the next deal, you're welcome to come in. And quite frankly, your probably ownership role is going to go up because we know how valuable you are.
Yeah. And I didn't realize how rare that was until you start talking to people, and it's not as well organized as you think. Automatically, it's like everybody knows exactly what to do. That's not the case, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you're like, wow, I didn't realize I had something to offer in that area. I thought this was a given, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
I see it in my W-2 as well. I mean, you expect people to operate, communicate, professional, whatever it may be, in a timely manner, and it's rare actually.
Yeah.
So
That's probably I would say that's very rare.
yeah.
I just got an email from an investor the other day thanking me for the amount of communication and transparency we put into deals. Um, and he invested in several deals and said that, that's not the case in all these deals. And I think I need to do a better job and step it up.
Yeah.
So if I think we need to do a better job, that means they're doing even worse. And it's how it is. A lot of people don't communicate very well.
Yeah.
And they don't know who's doing what. We all just try to kind of do the same thing.
Yeah. I've learned the same lesson, even like contractors and smaller projects at the home or the investment property. I mean, there's the same thing there. I mean, they're just not really well known for communication. That just adds stress. It's unnecessary, in my opinion.
Yep. Why the podcast? Why did you decide to start your podcast? Well, tell everybody the name again, and then why did you decide to start it again?
So it's called Crushing Cashflow, and a couple of reasons really. One, as I'm educating myself, I'm looking at those that are successful. I'm thinking, what's another way aside of just putting on a website and talking to a couple of people? What's a way to get across my intentions, share my passion, share information, educate people, and meet people as quickly as possible in a known format? And I'm like, well, okay, there's tons of podcasts out there anyway. What I realize is, so what? I mean, no one has the same experience as you do. No one's going to ask the exact same questions. And your sphere of influence, your immediate sphere of influence, your friends and family, where you're starting, they don't know about the other podcasts anyway. So why not give them something to relate to? And as you're having one-on-ones with people, number one, you're kind of establishing a way to have connections with people that otherwise wouldn't give you the time of day in the beginning. You're getting that opportunity to meet people, and you're sharing that with whoever, dozens or hundreds of people that download it every week. So it's a win-win, and it's not a huge time commitment for anybody that's thinking about it, and you're just trying to build your brand. Why not do everything I can within reason without killing myself in time and effort? Why not do things that are proven, repeatable ways to get your name out there?
Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. What are 3 steps? What are 3 things, 3 key, success areas that you can tell the listener who says, wow, I want to do what he just did. Like, I want to go from not being on the GP side of any deal to now closing on 2, pretty sizable multifamily deals in a very short period of time to when you first decided this is where I'm going. What are like 3 key success tips? And maybe we've already mentioned some of them, but
We have, but I'll recap. And there's no secret sauce, right? To me, it's about, and sounds very cliche and repetitive, but it's like, okay, lay out your plan and what are the aspects of that plan. Let's say over a 90-day period. That's what that's what my plan was, 90 days. I got a whiteboard. I broke it into different areas. I already mentioned education. What are you doing? Something every day. Networking. What are you doing? You've got deals and you've got your brand. You know, assume that you're establishing LLC of some sort, whatever structure, it doesn't matter. Week by week, what are you doing for those 90-day goals, and stick to it consistently? I mean, it's simple as that, but
Yeah.
I'm breaking out those 3 months week by week. And I wish I could show you my camera. I still have it up there. I do it in the W-2. I do it on the Redline and Crushing Cashflow side. What are you doing consistently? Even when you don't feel like doing it, you've got to stick to it. And that's where the execution is where people fall down. A lot of people are great planners. They can think about, they know what to do. They read the books.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you falling down? Hold yourself accountable. And if you can't hold yourself accountable, join a group that will. Yeah. Accountability pod, mastermind group, doesn't matter. Yeah. And if you're self-motivated, I consider myself to be self-motivated. I do that, but I still benefit from having people kick me in the butt every once in a while, or even just putting it out there publicly. I'm like, wow, I feel like I got to live up to that expectation. So simple as plan, execute consistently to the plan. There's going to be days, weeks where you're burned out. If you need to, take a break, take a rest. It happens to everybody. I felt like I was at a point like 2 weeks ago where I'm like, all right, I just did a couple of deals, taking on more responsibility in W-2. I need to take a break. And that's fine. I mean, you're going to have that. I mean, you're going to be burned out. It's better to take a breath, take a break than quit, right? So if you're not feeling energized, passionate, that's normal. Take a break, 2 weeks.
It's not for too long.
Not for too long. Correct. Yeah. For me, like a week goes a long way, you know? So I might be like, okay, I feel like I'm not as excited about this as I was. You go through a lot of stress, take a break, not for too long.
Yep. No, I love it. I love the 90-day goals too. And like you said, everybody can plan. So we can put those 90-day goals up. We can actually plan them, but are you actually executing on them? So what are you truly doing? So make sure when you do your goals, you actually have action steps to take. And then you're taking those action steps. That's the biggest thing. And you already said it. Like there's so many people that want to do XYZ. They want to be multifamily investors. They want to flip houses. They want to, but then when it comes to what are you doing? What are you actually doing? I've read the books. Okay, great. But what are you doing? Mm-hmm. You know, are you actually taking the real steps? Because it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. I want to ask you just another couple questions.
Sure.
And then we'll wrap up. So what's a mistake that you've made? And it doesn't have to be necessarily just recently. What's a mistake you've made through any of your real estate or business journey that you think people can really learn from?
So I'll go back to and I still deal with this because I got a lot. I know you dabble in construction quite a bit. I like to be a lot of hands-on in projects. I deal with a lot of contractors. Never make assumptions with contractors in the scope of work, timing, or anything like that. I've kind of learned and I'm a planner, as you know, I've talked about that. Renovations, things like that, never pretty much go as planned. No. So in budget and timing, I almost double them. And I've learned that, and you think I learned that lesson after multiple projects have kind of gone south, or like renovation type thing where they take longer, that we found rotted wood, water leaks, whatever. That's one thing, is if you're new to that type of thing, I'm not anymore, but if I had to go back 10 years and, even the single family space, it's the same thing, just on a scale of multifamily renovation and construction. Never take their word for gold. Contractors, that is.
Oh yeah. Never. They're always going to be, like you said, they're always going to cost you more than what they say.
Yeah.
They're always going to take a lot longer than what they tell you. So when they tell you it's going to take a month, it's going to take 2.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah. And I mean, I do have a couple of like guys that I really like to work with. The problem is they're never available because everybody knows they're really good. So you can't count on having that gold standard for every project.
It's funny. We're doing a really big renovation on an apartment building right now. And when we first got started, the contractor said it's going to take about 3 to 4 weeks to turn an entire unit. And I told my partners, I said, that's great. He thinks it's going to take 3 to 4 weeks, but it will take 6 to 8 weeks. I promise you that.
Yeah.
And we got to a point where they were getting frustrated because it was taking him, it was getting to like week 5. And I'm like, guys, I told you 6 to 8 weeks is what.
And it's one thing if it's all interior work, it can be more controlled. When weather becomes a factor.
Oh, especially when weather becomes a factor.
It's like, even a small example, when we built a pool at our primary home here in PA a couple of years back, and they swore on paper and contractually they'd be done in 6 to 8 weeks. You know how long that took? A year.
Oh, wow.
It rained like 5 out of 7 days. It was, some of it was outside their control, the weather for sure, but they played off of that excuse like for months and months and months, and it was very stressful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Dirt piles in your yard everywhere. All right. So I want to wrap up here. What's a favorite book you can recommend to our listeners?
I think my favorite one that is applicable to anybody, whether you're syndicating or not, if you're interested in multifamily, The Hands-Off Investor by Brian Burke is great. I recommend it to my investors all the time, saying, hey, if you're starting somewhere, you want to know the ropes of what goes through my head, phenomenal book. It covers it soup to nuts. You can skip over some sections if you're not super interested, but a great overview of what should go through an investor's mind passively, or even as a sponsor, as you're looking for, selecting, evaluating, and operating a property.
Yeah. Talk about awesome people. Brian's a great person. He's been on the show for listeners. If you want to listen to him, I don't know the episode off the top of my head, but it was maybe a year and a half or 2 ago. So,
come on, Bob, you don't have an index in your brain.
I don't have the index sitting up here. What's a way you like to give back?
I see myself longer term becoming more of a formal mentor, but I don't mind taking calls from like more junior people who are doing, like you mentioned, how do you rinse and repeat? I'm getting a lot of messages from people in bigger pockets and from the forums and posting these articles. I love just spending 15 minutes to kick somebody in the right direction, or, hey, give them the same advice we just talked about now, but tailored to what they're doing. So I really like to just talking to people one-on-one and informally coaching, mentoring, whatever. So I enjoy it. It helps them. It helps me. It helps refine my skills. It helps them, obviously. So
cool. Last question. What are your 3 pillars of wealth creation?
I think we covered them. Relentless education.
Yeah.
Relentless networking, and consistent, thoughtful action in the right direction.
Love it. Good stuff. Well, Andrew, appreciate you being on the show. Tons of value. It's exciting. I'm excited to just continue to watch your journey and help you along the way. But man, it's just been phenomenal so far already. And so I'm just excited to watch you grow. And I know we're going to have you back on this podcast when you own 10,000 units, which will be like next year probably. But we're going to have you back on, and it's going to be fun to talk about the journey that you've gone through and the lessons that you've learned. But how can our listeners get in touch with you, talk to you, learn more about what you got going on?
Great. And firstly, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been an honor to talk to you and share some of the small pieces of knowledge I've learned in a short period of time. But you can look at me in couple different places. Redline Equity is our investment firm. Website is investwithredline.com. Email is good, Andrew@investwithredline. Or as you mentioned before, our podcasts, we're on Facebook, Instagram, any of that, any of the major platforms, Crushing Cashflow, look it up on Facebook, or Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of those major platforms. It's good.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for being on the show and, taking this time and spending with us.
Sure. Happy to help, man.
Have a fantastic rest of the day.
You too. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So
The other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out, and we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.